We're starting.
Hello and welcome to our webcast for May 18, 2018. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, not dead yet. And also joining us, oh yes, that was because the Queen, okay. Also joining us is Taylor Hyatt, our policy analyst and our outreach coordinator, very young, 26 years old only.
Birthday on Monday. Happy birthday.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
Today's topics.
Hey.
Sorry, to be serious.
Non, tu as manqué la description de Toujours Vivant, not dead yet.
Oh, sorry. Toujours Vivant, not dead yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities.
And our allies.
And our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability right opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and ending of life practices that discriminate people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so today's topics. We have three subjects. The first one is AMA, which American Medical Association panel recommended staying off the course.
Staying the course, yes.
Yeah. California, sorry, I have difficulty pronouncing. Miss some teeth. You're not so young.
Yeah.
California court declared assisted suicide law unconstitutional. And the third one is Roger Foley calls for a stop to euthanasia Canada. So it's very rare that we have three subjects very positive for us.
Oops. Yeah. Okay. So
Amy Asbrook will help us among those three subjects.
I will do that as soon as I figure out. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little glitch there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Council of Ethical and Judicial Affairs, CEJA, of the American Medical Association, AMA, was asked to consider and offer recommendations on two possible actions related to their policy on physician-assisted suicide. And here are the two resolutions. Resolution 15A16 would change the AMA's position from opposing assisted suicide and euthanasia to having a neutral stance on the practice. And Resolution 14A17 would have the AMA define and add the term aid in dying to policy discussions and position statements.
So both of it are to make sure that the AMA turn toward in favor of the suicide and euthanasia,
right,
which is not really the recommendation of the committee.
Well, yeah, they recommended against both resolutions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, should they take a neutral position? And a lot of states, once their medical associations took neutral positions, the state then went on to pass and adopt assisted suicide. So that's why it's such an important thing. And the second one, right now, the AMA uses the term physician-assisted suicide, and so
which is the real thing.
Right, but advocates were trying to push the term medical aid in dying, and so they're rejecting that out as well. Earlier this month, the CEJA issued a report explaining its decision to recommend no change to current policies. The report will be considered at the AMA's meeting next month. So this is just a recommendation, and the AMA, the whole
but from the Committee of Ethics.
Right, it's from their ethics committee.
It is very, very, very important.
Right.
If you vote against the committee may just disappear or resign.
Right. Hard to say. It would be pretty dramatic if they rejected the recommendation, but you never know, because the people who are pushing assisted suicide are pushing very hard. The CEJA took up the language question first. It explained that the term people used to describe assisted suicide and euthanasia reflect the political and ethical positions of the two sides of the debate. Though the resolution did not propose using the phrase death with dignity, the CEJA noted that supporters prefer it because it emphasizes, quote, patients' values and goals, while, quote, aid in dying, unquote, signals doctors' commitment to care for and support the person. And when I was writing this, I had to, all the time they use the word patient, 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 patient. And come on, they're people. They're people.
Yeah, but for doctor, they are people.
And that's part of the problem with medical industry is they
a little bit, because for people, patient costs money.
Right.
People need care.
Right.
And it's not always on the same track.
Right. And one of the problems with the medical system is that people turn into objects of medical care, not people. Yeah. So the CEJA felt the term physician-assisted suicide has negative connotations regarding patients' psychological state.
You think?
Yes.
Yes, it's negative.
Right.
But that is not really a fun thing.
Right. Suicide is not positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you are suicidal, people recognize that you have some kind of problem in your life.
Yeah.
Yes. At least some. Yeah.
Of course, you are not, if you want to end your life, there's something, excuse me, but off psychologically.
Yeah, but most of the time when you try to do you help, urgent help.
Urgent help, not, people who are feeling suicidal ask for help so that they don't have to do it. They ask for help to ease the pain, to deal with the social situations in their lives, but and that's a good thing. That's why we have suicide prevention programs. Yes. So though the resolution did not propose using the phrase death with dignity, the CEJ, I already read that, didn't I? Okay, negative connotations. Yet they point out that aid in dying and death with dignity are euphemisms that, quote, obscure or sanitize the activity. And we've said this many times. They're euphemisms, they're not real. Assisted suicide is what it is. In the absence of a perfect option, the CEJA chooses to stick with physician-assisted suicide because it describes the practice most accurately. In doing so, the CEJA appears to be taking the position that assisted suicide and euthanasia is, in fact, suicide, which is also good news.
And what we said for a long time ago, a suicide is a suicide, whatever the age, the condition, or the time left to live, a suicide is a suicide.
Right. So they don't say, outright that we think physician-assisted suicide is a suicide, but they do say that phrase accurately describes what we're talking about. And since there's so much pressure to say that assisted suicide is not actually a suicide, that's a very important point.
Yes.
Okay. The CEJA lists several values that unite the two sides of the debate and says reasonable people can have very different ideas of what actions will best support these values. These include, 1, hope for a death that preserves dignity.
Everybody wants it.
Right. Everybody wants it. And the problem, of course, is that people assume that if you have a disability, you don't have dignity. And,
which is false.
Right. And you better die because that's the only way you can get dignity, which is right.
Which is false. Right. Completely false.
The sacredness of taking care of someone at the end of life, which is very true, a good value. Recognizing that relief of suffering is a primary goal of medicine, and we all agree on that.
Yes.
And finally, that fully voluntary participation by both the person making the request and the doctor.
And the key word is voluntary.
Right.
And here in Canada, we have missed that one.
Right. Right. So voluntary both by the person making request and by the doctor.
And by the doctor.
Right.
So we just forget the size of the doctor, and it's not always voluntary. In Ontario, it's obligatory.
Right.
And it's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. And
in
Ontario,
Quebec, they tried not to but they just kind of burn the arm of a physician by cutting some subsidiary and things like that.
Right. They're definitely making it more difficult for palliative care programs that don't provide assisted suicide.
Yeah. So it's not always voluntary. In Canada, we are not yet there.
Right.
Yet there.
Okay. The report suggests that decisions should rest on thoughtful, stable, and meaningful values and principles. This is not controversial. Not at all. Okay. The report never directly raises issues of discrimination, equity, or equality. It only refers to coercion of vulnerable persons, which is a phrase we're familiar with from the vulnerable persons.
But we agree because the three first ones inflame the debate. Okay, people not thinking when you try to do that thing.
Well,
okay,
I don't know.
Most of the time,
some of us disagree, but
yeah. Well, okay, we agree to disagree.
Right, and they also refer to patients from disadvantaged groups.
Yeah,
and so they're not saying directly that it's people with disabilities or people who are poor or people of color.
But we agree that people with disability are disadvantaged.
Yeah. Well, they're not saying it directly, so who knows what they're
when they doesn't say directly, they say indirectly.
Right. The CEJA does say that taking a neutral position amounts to agreement with assisted suicide and euthanasia and rejects that option. Yes. Good.
Finally.
Good recommendation. Go ahead, Taylor. What were you going to say?
No, I was just excited that they weren't neutral because that seems to be the new trend for everyone. Excuse me. But if there is one thing I could tell them, it would be to go back to their principle that relief of suffering is a main goal of medicine. Death isn't a pain reliever.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. The CEJA says the question of whether safeguards can prevent unintended consequences for people who request assisted suicide, doctors who provide it, and society at large remains deeply contested. So they're saying it's still up in the air. And to give you another view, the Supreme Court basically said there's no problem. The Supreme Court said, we agree with Justice Smith from the British Columbia Court, who said that there isn't really a problem here. So they're saying it's still
there is a problem
contested.
Yeah. So U.S. doctors say the committee of ethics committee of the AMA say there is a problem, and Canada say no, there is no problem.
They're saying the question of whether there's a problem is under debate.
Yeah.
The report cites studies that claim no problems have arisen, and others that question those conclusions, claiming the data are flawed, inadequate, and distorted.
That's what we say.
Right. And it's very unusual for people. Usually they say, well, there's tons of studies that say there's no problem. And people don't usually go beyond that point. So that's very important as well.
Search the real study, not economical study.
Yeah.
scientific studies, they say there is no problem. You will have hard time to find one.
Well, the studies that say there's no problem are the ones that just study the reports that the doctors turn in and don't question about whether
I talk about scientific study.
Right.
Okay, find one really scientific study about that, and you will have a hard time to find one.
Right. The panel also notes that in Europe, eligibility criteria have enlarged. Due care procedures are not always followed, and the CEJA questions whether oversight of the practice is adequate to prevent abuses. And they give some examples from studies that we've talked about in the last few weeks. So that's great. You know, somebody's listening. Woohoo!
Yeah, at least somebody take care and look at very important thing and scientific thing.
Yeah.
Not only the thing, oh, they suffer, kill them.
Right. The panel concluded that evidence that there have not yet been adverse consequences cannot guarantee that such consequences will occur in the future.
The absence of proof is not the proof of absence.
Yes. And again, that's really important that they drew that conclusion. And the fact is that the reason there's no evidence of the absence because evidence isn't being gathered very well.
No.
So there's a reason for that.
Data, getting scientific data, getting the scientific things are not done yet.
Right.
Government don't care about it,
right.
But it is what we need.
Right. The CEJA notes that doctors fail to discuss end-of-life issues, including palliative care, with their patients. As a result, quote, many patients may be led to request assistance. Understand the degree of relief of suffering state-of-the-art palliative care can offer. So, you know, they're sort of getting at the doctors, poke, 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 hey, you should be talking about this with people. But they don't mention that many people don't have access to palliative care. There's still tons of uninsured people or people whose insurance is not good or inadequate supply of palliative care.
In Canada, it's 37%.
No, it's only 30% that have access.
Let's say 30, but be generous. Let's say 35, okay? Yeah. But there is 65 who are not who doesn't have access.
Right. And that's not okay.
That's not a slight part. It's the majority.
Right. And this is where this is the point on which the CEJA talks about the disadvantaged groups and people who are vulnerable to coercion, but in a way that puts the burden on the individuals rather than on society for creating and maintaining the inequality and disadvantage. So, you know, they're still sort of doing it in the traditional way, that it's the problem of the people who are disadvantaged. It's not the problem of society. But we know that it's the problem of society that has to be dealt with.
There will be always disabled people, whatever we do. Okay?
Right.
Plus or minus 17, 15, 20%. But there will be always. And a fifth of the society, it's a large part of the population. It's not the majority, but it's the large part.
And that doesn't mean we give up and say, oh, well, those people are always just going to get screwed.
Well, we scrap a fifth of our population. Right. They are not good at all.
No, that's very capitalist, but anyway.
Yeah.
So while the CEJA's recommendation to reject the two resolutions is a positive step, their conservative approach and failure to incorporate principles of equity and discrimination may cause the recommendations to be rejected by progressive members of the American Medical Association.
Maybe, but
we don't know.
We don't know, but
we'll see at the meeting.
We don't think so
month.
Because they will say that their committee of ethics is not good.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. That's the end of the first topic. Second topic, California court declares assisted suicide law unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And this is probably a very temporary situation, but it's good news. When California's assisted suicide law was passed, a lot of people were shocked. That's because it was passed during a special legislative session on healthcare funding in October of 2015. This followed the sponsor's failure to get enough votes to pass it out of the healthcare committee in July of that year. Okay, so they couldn't get enough votes to get it out of the healthcare committee. It died there, and everybody thought, okay, we're done. And then all of a sudden it comes back up. Wait a minute, it's not healthcare funding, but it was considered in that session.
They cheat, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. By introducing an assisted suicide bill during the special session, advocates bypassed the committee process, where careful consideration and ongoing controversy had defeated all previous attempts at legalization. And there have been lots of bills that have been introduced in California.
Because this is a controversy thing.
Right, exactly. And there's a reason we have the committee process, which is so that it can be studied. And when it's studied and they can't reach a consensus or even a majority, then that means shouldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
A group of doctors challenged the law once it passed. And this week, a state superior court judge ruled that the bill should not have been heard during the special section, since it did not concern healthcare funding.
Normally you should not cheat.
Right.
That's what you said.
No, not cheat.
Nobody.
Though he declared the law unconstitutional, Judge Daniel Otoya gave the California Attorney General 5 days to appeal the ruling, and it's pretty sure that he's going to appeal it.
Yes, but we doesn't know what is the decision now.
Right, but guaranteed pretty much that it will be appealed. An appeal would allow the law to stay in effect until the higher court rules. So that's something to keep an eye on. And it's, everybody was shocked that it was ruled unconstitutional, but, we'll see what happens. Okay. Taylor, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
Not for this, but those 5 days run out on Sunday, so we'll know pretty soon what their plan is.
Count the weekend days. I think it's 5 working days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll know by the middle of this coming week what they're going to do.
Yeah. Next Friday we will talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Our last item, Roger Foley calls for a stop to euthanasia in Canada. And if you recall, Roger Foley is the guy who's in a hospital, and he has filed suit against, among others, the government of Canada to demanding that they pass a law that provides services to help people live rather than have assisted suicide.
Yeah, anyway, it was the promise in Quebec. It was the promise of the Mr. Couillard saying that we will give access to palliative care to everybody, and everybody will have home care, and everybody.
No, he didn't promise that.
Oh, yeah,
no,
not
didn't.
Kind of it.
He
not promised directly.
He didn't. It was specifically not there. And I remember remarking on that.
No, but he said he will improve the home care. He promised that. And it's not the case.
Okay, anyway. Roger Foley has issued a letter to Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould calling for Canada's assisted suicide and euthanasia program to be stopped until legislation guaranteeing adequate supports can be put in place. He also called for a public inquiry on assisted suicide and euthanasia provided in Canada since the practice were legalized in 2016.
Good thing, an inquiry must be.
Go ahead, I cut you off.
Okay, well, go ahead, Taylor.
From a non-discrimination perspective, well done.
Yeah.
From a political perspective, I think part of it is a bit misguided. I think he needed to work a bit harder on selling the non-discrimination angle, because no one's going to say, let's put this human right and freedom to choose the end of one's own life on pause while we investigate.
Right.
On the other hand, if you've been keeping up with us, you know about the many holes in Health Canada's monitoring regulations. If this study is done the way he wants it to, perhaps we can find fill some gaps that have been left open. And
right, Health Canada has issued interim reports, but they have not given information about the reasons people request assisted suicide, the motivations behind the requests. And the program has been in effect for 2 years. And I think that an inquiry is absolutely called for, because we need to understand why people are asking to have their lives ended. And if those people are not experiencing external pressure and inducements, if they're not vulnerable to being induced to commit suicide. And those are the two phrases from the Supreme Court's decision that need to be attended to.
I agree. No comment.
Okay. This is a quote, people with disabilities are being assisted to their death rather than being assisted with life, the letter said. We talked about Foley's lawsuit on our webcast of March 16th of this year. So you can go back.
We do.
And there's a link on our text version that if you receive that, if you don't receive it, you can sign up.
Everything that we said in the text of this emission is related, and you could
right. We try to back up everything we say.
Yeah, everything is backed up.
And
So
we provide source information for what we say. So
go and read by yourself.
Right. Taylor, is there anything you want us to add?
Maybe I should be a bit clearer. I'm not disagreeing with the fact that he's calling for an investigation. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I'm scared, though, that Ms. Wilson-Raybould and her colleagues are going to go, why are you investigating a human right?
Right, right. And in fact, that's how it's been portrayed as a human right. But, you know, and unfortunately, I don't think, I agree with you that the argument hasn't been made strongly enough. And it sure as heck isn't being picked up, because, you know, this came out of CTV News, but it has not been picked up by any other mainstream news service.
Like it's not important.
Right. As if it's not important. Somebody's calling for a stop to this euthanasia program and nobody thinks that's important. Come on. Yeah, I mean, this is the issue that we've been talking about in terms of reporting on the issue.
Yeah, but if somebody sue because he wants suicide, the press is all over it.
Yeah. Okay. For more information on the subjects that we talk about here, you can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours vivant not dead yet. Visit our website at tvndy.ca, and Taylor's been doing a lot of work on our website, so that's good. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Christian for helping out, and to Taylor as well.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you for being there. We will see you next time.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.